Welcome to Two Shallow Divers, your friendly scuba show. I'm Molly McCready.
And I'm Sean McCready. Today we're giving our first dive report. We'll be talking all about our dives in Bora Bora today. So just like a boat dive, let's jump right in. For all of those of you who are tuning into our YouTube video for the first time today, Molly and I believe that there should be a scuba secret handshake. And rather than a secret handshake, we figure that it's probably best to have a fist bump because sometimes you're wearing gloves.
Totally.
And sometimes you're in the water and you're not anywhere close to your scuba buddy.
But instead of telling you all the secrets of our secret handshake, you're going to have to just go and watch this video on YouTube.
Yeah. So, scuba secret handshake. If you do that, divers everywhere should be able to identify each other. All right. So, Molly, I think we shared with our listeners that we got scuba certified in order to go diving on our honeymoon.
Right.
Can you tell them a little bit about our honeymoon plans?
Sure. So I have to start by sharing that Sean has mastered the point system. Credit cards, flights, hotels, etc. If there is a point system to be mastered, Sean has figured it out. So I have benefited from this greatly, but definitely the best use of our points thus far has been our honeymoon trip. So for our honeymoon, we talked in advance about what we wanted to do, and we were able to take 2 weeks off of work, which was great. And so we decided to do 2 different locations and put them together. So the first week we were in Peru, and the second week we were in Bora Bora in French Polynesia. Peru was awesome. We went to Machu Picchu, Urubamba, Cusco, and then we flew to Santiago for a night to catch our flight to Tahiti. It was almost a disaster, and we can share more about that later. But we did make it to Tahiti and then on to Bora Bora and had an unbelievable week. And it was basically paradise. We stayed in one of those overwater bungalows, and they are just as cool as they look like they would be when you see them on TV. And yeah, we just spent the week like enjoying island life. And of course, one of the best parts of island life was scuba diving. So since Sean, you did you did all of the booking for our...
Thank you for giving credit where credit is due.
But since you booked all of it, do you want to share a little bit about what you were looking for when you booked our dives and what dive company we ended up going with?
Yeah, so booking our dives, when it was our first time diving, I had really no idea what to look for. I browsed a couple channels and websites to see what I could get. But basically, I knew what we were looking for was small group diving. Right. That was the one thing that we kind of had identified as being something that we thought we would enjoy more. So in looking at the different dive shops, we found one, Eleuthera Divers, which was they had a good website, very communicative. When I emailed asking about boat size and dive policies and packages, they were really great. The price was reasonable. We were already spending a lot on our honeymoon, but it was enough that we could justify going diving. And as any good dive shop should do, the more you dive, the more you save. So we signed up for 8 dives. So they had the service to come pick you up at the hotel. So each morning we got to get up bright and early and be picked up at our dive shop. I realized when looking at our dive times, we were picked up probably right around 8 a.m. So not the earliest wake up as some that we've had, and doable for you, Molly. So that was kind of what we looked into. They were just great communicating. So I have to give my kudos to them. Pricing was clear and transparent. And yeah, I feel like they started us off on a good foot in our diving adventures.
Yeah. And as first-time divers, first time out of, like, in a real place, not a quarry, it was really nice to be with this dive company. They were really, like, supportive to first-time divers. They let us know what to expect. They went over everything with us ahead of the dives. All dive masters will do that ahead of your dive, but I feel like...
most dive masters do that. The good ones all do it.
The good ones do. And these were some of the good ones. But they also kind of went through all of the safety measures with us and just were very reassuring with every step of the way. So on our first dive, I had some trouble equalizing, and I'm pretty sure one of the dive masters actually had to hold my hand for part of the dive, which was very nice of him, and that's all I needed. After that first dive, I was good to go. But they were helpful.
Calms the nerves.
Absolutely.
We did our first day of diving, and the first day of scuba diving was amazing because in our first dive, on our first day, we pretty much fulfilled all my life dreams as far as scuba diving went. I think I mentioned in a previous episode that I was obsessed with manta rays and the idea of diving with manta rays. And our first dive site was, and of course you give me both Eleuthera, the pronunciation of dive shop, and the first dive site name, which I believe is Anau. We're going to go with that. If you know I'm wrong, somebody please correct me out there. But it was a manta channel and cleaning station. And so in our very first dive, we saw tons of manta rays. Yeah. Saw a boatload of wrasses attached to the manta rays and kind of swimming alongside the manta rays. Some cleaning wrasses doing their cleaning. And it was amazing. So in the briefing, when our dive master was telling us what was going to happen, we got the great warning that we've now come to know is just kind of standard with mantas of when you're diving, approach slowly, and as we go under them, exhale slowly and in small streams, kind of almost like you're whistling. And so the reason being that the bubbles, if you're blowing out your full breaths of fresh air, or not fresh air, I guess, of used air, will both spook and tickle the mantas, scaring them off. And so we found that to be pretty delightful. Molly, being awesome, very ticklish herself, definitely liked the idea of sympathizing with the mantas for being tickled under the water.
Also, manta rays are huge, and so the idea that these very large animals would get tickled by just our breathing out of water, it was entertaining to me.
Yep. So the dive was great. The dive site, we dove through some beautiful coral on the way up there. But the highlight was definitely the mantas. Lots of them. I want to say we saw probably a dozen. And and it seemed like a couple juveniles. There were some that were definitely smaller. I saw at least one or two that were significantly smaller than the adults. We were diving in August, so it might be a little early. I'm not totally sure, but I think that might have been around the season. Otherwise, they were just small, one or the other. And our second dive site was the aquarium, which was our first shark sighting, as there were a bunch of black tips in the area. And it was pretty cool to dive in. This is, again, our first boat dive because we were previously diving in a quarry.
Right.
And diving in off the boat and immediately looking down and seeing 1, 2, 3 black tips swimming around, and then realizing just I am a grossly inefficient creature in this water, and they are literally built for this environment, and looked curious without being in any way alarmed, just kind of slowly making the orbits to be what's going on here? And that idea of being in the water and kind of standing, I didn't have good trim yet. So as I went in, I'm vertical, just kind of watching these guys go around and just realizing I am in awe of these creations that are clearly built for this.
Yeah, I think one of the other cool things about the black tips was that when we saw them initially, we were like, oh my gosh, there's a shark. Oh my gosh. So excited that we were seeing sharks for the first time. And by the end of that week, even, I think we were like, oh yeah, there's another one.
Yeah.
There's another black tip shark.
Yep. There's some sharks.
No big deal. Just some black tip sharks.
That said, it's still a big deal. They're awesome.
I mean, it's super cool, but it's funny to see.
You're no longer alarmed.
Right. Yeah. And I think that was a big piece of it, was that like you said, they weren't that interested in us. They kind of took inventory of us,
threat.
but we, exactly. So, recognizing their disinterest in us, made my impression of sharks very different. Okay, so that was our first day. On day 2, we also did 2 dives. The first was in Ha'apiti. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right either. So again, listeners, if you're listening to this and cringing at our poor pronunciations, please let us know. And we apologize.
We are neither French nor Polynesian.
And unfortunately, that makes us very bad at this podcast right now.
Yes.
So On that dive, again, we saw more black-tip sharks, and just a whole host of other fish. One of the neat things about all of our dives was that they were pretty shallow, and so there was good light coming into the water, and it was just gorgeous. The visibility was pretty incredible.
Yeah. Compared to a quarry where I couldn't see tamale away, and then when we got in the water and realized, oh, I can see endlessness.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was
beautiful. Nice. And then on the second dive was my favorite dive of our whole trip. But we went to what's called the Grand Canyon. And as you would anticipate, there is a canyon. So like a nice deep sort of ravine underwater. And as we approached this area, we started to see what looked like a flock of birds. And our guide kind of motioned for us to kneel on the ground there on the sand. And so all of us knelt down and just sort of stood at attention. Like think of the, what are those like, they're not gophers. What are the animals that
meerkats?
Pop up? Meerkats. Yeah. That's what I felt like we looked like. We were all just like sort of standing at attention. And this beautiful group of eagle rays came swimming through. And how many would you say there were?
30.
Yeah. I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah.
Just this huge group of them. And I mean, their motions are slow and like graceful underwater. Mm-hmm. And so it was pretty breathtaking to get to see that. And we saw that right at the beginning of that dive. And the rest of that dive, it was like, who cares what else we see? Like, that was amazing.
I cared.
Okay, yeah, sure.
But yeah, they were good. Day 3 and 4 of our Bora Bora dives. Day 3, dive 1, we had a great dive in Tupua, I believe is the pronunciation. Lots of really great anemones, really beautiful colors, great schools of fish also in that dive and in dive 4 or dive 2 of day 3. So that one was at the dive site, the dance hall. That one was really our first dive where we were swimming almost through schools of fish. I remember that. You could tell we were early in our diving because we don't know the names of almost any of the fish we had.
In fact, in our notes from our dive logs, it said things like schools of fish.
Yeah.
Which, you know, not so helpful now.
Yeah. Recommendation for if you're diving, look at a website to find the fish in the area. A lot of dive shops in the local area will have the cards with the fish in the area, the kind of laminated cards. Great to pick up. You can order them online. Have them for when you go to your dive site so you actually know what you're looking for.
Yeah, and it's a fun thing to do at the end of your dive when you're like kind of debriefing with your dive buddy or your friends or whoever. Yeah. You can be like, oh yeah, do you remember when we saw this one? Or I didn't see this one. Did you see this one? It's nice to have a reference.
Yeah, these ones are down by the rocks. These were up there.
Yeah.
All that. So anyway, yeah, definitely recommend that. Our dive notes have gotten substantially better, except for when we went to Cozumel, in which case they were pretty terrible. But anyway, day 4, we were back to Anau. That was another great dive. And then on day 4, our 8th and final dive was to Tapu, which is one where they had a shark feeding, which, was interesting. It was our first time going down. We were kind of told about the shark feeding, as we were in there and given our directions. So there were lemon sharks in the area. We were swimming down, kind of told to kneel on the ground, again, kind of behind a little coral formation where we could see over it, and the cage with the fish head was out there. It was kind of neat to see how cautious the lemon shark approaches are. Really kind of circling slowly, no urgency. Kind of the idea of the frenzy was not at all accurate with the feeding. It seemed very slow and deliberate. And we had an amazing angle when the shark actually came and grabbed what was left of the fish head, which had been kind of picked apart by some black tips a little bit and some lemon sharks that had taken chunks of the fish. But the kind of structure of the fish head held the lemon shark's mouth open as the shark bit into it. So the shark's head, or the lemon shark's head, swam up and over us, jaws open, kind of coming in, which was a pretty cool sensation, a pretty cool view.
Also, understand it was terrifying, but really cool. Super cool.
That was the moment where at one point I turned to look at you guys and our two other dive buddies who were in the water with us to be like, how amazing is this? And realized that it was like one of those things where if you want to volunteer, please take a step forward and everybody else steps back. All of you had taken a step back and I was just immersed and engaged in the feeding that I didn't take the step back.
No, you didn't, but the rest of us did because it was slightly terrifying, but it really was very cool.
Yeah, I think an awesome sight. Probably, it was definitely one of the highlight experiences. I think since then, kind of come to feel
good.
Kind of a tough moral stance on like, should there be shark feedings or not? I tend to believe the like, don't engage, don't interact with your environment. That's the attitude I typically have. I know the shark feedings make for controlled environments and people like them and it's kind of the highlight, but it doesn't sit well.
Yeah. I was hoping that you were going to get into that a little bit because I think since then we've gotten, we've had the opportunity to see more things. Obviously we've gone on a lot more dives since then. And so we've had the chance to see a lot more things just kind of happen naturally in front of us.
Yeah.
And both have really enjoyed having that opportunity and really gaining a stronger appreciation for the fact that you really don't interact with or don't leave any kind of mark in the environment when we're going scuba diving. And so to like bring in a cage with food for the sharks felt a little different.
Yeah, I think what it ultimately comes down to for me is the experiences I've had without any prompting or baiting are awe-inspiring enough that I don't feel like it needs that.
Yeah.
The challenging thing is, for a local economy, sometimes those feedings can be very beneficial. But I also think if you promote diving in the right way, you don't need that to be beneficial to your community. I don't know. I don't know enough to... I feel like I should be very much against it. I don't know enough for the arguments for it to feel like I have a well-informed decision. But I just feel like, in general, my philosophy is don't touch, don't interact.
Right.
And that's why I would say I'm not for it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So interesting to acknowledge that, 3 years ago when we went on that dive, it was... I don't know that we signed up for I don't know if we intentionally signed up for the dive.
Know.
Okay. So yeah, if we had been given the choice, might not have made that decision, but
yeah,
we found ourselves in that position and there were some cool aspects to it.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone has good, well-written articles that you would recommend, if you could tag us on Facebook, Twitter, we're at 2 Shallow Divers.
It's the number 2.
The number 2 Shallow Divers on Twitter, facebook.com/2 Shallow Divers, Instagram, 2 Shallow Divers. Just tag us and share that.
Yeah, we'd love to learn more.
I know my gut feeling, but I like to know the background as well. So I think a couple of great highlights. The sharks were amazing. The manta rays were a dream come true. The eagle rays
were my favorite.
Are your long-standing favorite. So
and so then just to kind of wrap up our dive experience, I think we mentioned earlier that the visibility was incredible. I don't think we mentioned that the temperature of the water was awesome. So I think it was like 80 on land or like above the water.
Yep.
And maybe like 78 degrees.
Yeah,
in the water.
It was about the same.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
So I did wear a shorty because I get cold really easily all the time, but in water especially. Sean did not because he's more normal than I am, I think.
Yeah, no wetsuit. That was totally comfortable. And I think as far as how to be comfortable on your dives, those first couple dives, I think ask questions. That's my biggest bit of advice. Talk to your dive master, ask questions, know what you're going to do. Eleuthera was great about a good dive briefing. Pay attention
awesome.
during the dive briefing, I think is my number one bit of advice. Trust your dive master, but you are scuba certified or you're learning to be scuba certified. So it's up to you to know what you're doing. Yeah, I would say like that's the biggest thing for me. Communication. Anything that you would add to say how to be comfortable?
I think the only other thing that I would add, and I have had to remind myself of this, especially when we go diving after we haven't in a little while, is just to focus on breathing the first couple minutes. Mm-hmm. It's really easy to get caught up in all of the things around you that are really neat and exciting to see. But if you focus on breathing and really get into that even, steady breathing, that allows for everything else to go smoothly. And then you really can just allow your focus to shift elsewhere once you've got that rhythm down.
Yeah. And I think just those first couple dives, enjoy them. I mean, we're never going to forget those dives that just absolutely took our breath away. Our first dives in open water, just absolutely starstruck by the aquatic life of Bora Bora.
Yeah.
I try to go back every 5 years.
Hasn't happened yet.
Hasn't happened. Molly won't let me. We haven't celebrated 5-year anniversary.
Yet, though, so.
I tried to get her to go back every year.
That's true.
I actually tried to get her to move there, but apparently family matters. So we're here in the States.
Family, if you're listening to this, I get points for that.
Yes. Family, why don't you relocate to Bora Bora?
Okay, so before we wrap up, let's do our safety stop. With 3 minutes left, we can do some rapid fire questions. So you want to go first?
Yeah. How did your feelings about scuba diving change from when you did your pool and quarry dives to your first open water dives?
So that's a really good question. I think going into the pool and quarry dives, I knew how excited you were about scuba diving, and I maybe felt a little more hesitant than you, and I was very aware of that. So was conscious that it was okay for me to not feel 100% gung-ho about it as you were, but also recognize like it was okay for me to go at my own pace. Yep. By the time we were going to do our open water dives, I think I had a lot more confidence in the process and excitement for it. Also, we were in Bora Bora, so my feelings towards scuba diving were just euphoric and excited. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's good.
All right. Okay, my question for you. What's one non-scuba related recommendation that you can make about Bora Bora in case anyone is heading there?
My recommendation would be to get your dives in early in the morning and then try to dive again.
I said non-scuba related.
No, I would say non-scuba related. Bora Bora is expensive. Let's be honest. We have mastered, knock on wood, the points system, doing well on that. But if you could get to Bora Bora, which occasionally is not that crazy expensive, and you can get a place to stay in Bora Bora, which might be your big splurge. It's tough to stay there, but there's ways that you could stay in Bora Bora that are affordable. Everything else, like food and drink and things like that, can be crazy expensive. But if we found a little grocery store, we were able to do just lovely fresh fruit for our lunches and sandwiches, and our meals at night, we typically went and ate at the hotel. So we kind of splurged there.
It was our honeymoon.
Yeah. But you could save a little bit on meals by finding the local grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a big one. And then I think just appreciate the bejesus out of it. It was gorgeous. It was incredible. Yeah. I personally, one of the big things for me on tropical vacations is I don't enjoy those tropical locations that much. But Bora Bora, I did. That was incredible. It was gorgeous. We should go back.
Okay. 2 more years.
If you have any questions about our dive trip to Bora Bora, please ask. It's often a honeymoon kind of destination. You want to go and you want to make the most of it. We'd be glad to answer anything we can. We had some amazing dinners and amazing meals. Some
Played
good
with
adventures.
stingrays.
Played with stingrays. Did some kayaking. Did some paddleboarding. Yeah. So feel free to ask away, and we'll share with you now the story of how we almost didn't end up in Bora Bora and how our honeymoon almost fell apart.
To be fair, we had already completed half of our honeymoon. So even if it had, quote unquote, fallen apart at that point, we still would have had an amazing honeymoon. I'm just putting that out there.
True. Peru was amazing. But when we were talking about honeymoon destinations and you found out you could stay in an overwater bungalow on
I was
points,
a little bit excited.
you were like, can we do that? And that was the set off. Bora Bora was going to be the highlight of our honeymoon.
Okay, that's true. So I think I mentioned earlier, we had to stay a night in Santiago before we could fly to Bora Bora. What I didn't tell you earlier is that we actually had planned to spend like 10 or 11 hours on Easter Island. So we were going to fly from Chile to Easter Island,
Which is also Chile.
Sorry.
Fly from Chile to Chile.
Yes. All right. Let me say that differently. We were going to fly from Santiago to Easter Island. Better.
True.
And we were going to have 10 hours there.
See the big moe heads?
Yeah. We were going to try to
Big heads.
fit it all in. And then we were going to get back on the plane and fly to Bora Bora. Well, fly to Tahiti.
Yeah, because there's one day a week that you can fly from Santiago, land on Easter Island, take off that night, and land in Tahiti.
Sounded perfect.
We were on that flight.
But do you want to tell the story?
We sat on the runway for a good while for a fog delay. It was pretty dang foggy. You couldn't see anything.
It was.
We were getting a little nervous, and then we took off.
And
all was good in the world.
Great. And we flew for 2 hours.
About
maybe
two and a
half hours.
2.5 hours. And they come online and make an announcement that was a long announcement in Spanish. Not a, food service is stopping right now announcement.
And a couple people laughed in response. Okay, we should tell you we don't speak Spanish.
Yeah,
so
not well.
So a couple people laugh in response to this, and I turned to Sean and I'm like, Sean, I think they just said that we're turning around.
And I said, no way. There's people laughing. They wouldn't be laughing if they said we're turning around.
And I was like, you're probably right, because I don't speak Spanish, so I didn't really hear what was being said.
Yeah. And then they made the announcement in English.
And as it turned out, we were turning around. So there were really bad storms over Easter Island. There's really no other place you can land. Easter Island is in the middle of nowhere.
If you don't know this, the only reason why Easter Island has an airport large enough to land these planes on it is because the airport was built as part of the space shuttle program in case our shuttle couldn't land anywhere in the U.S. and had to overshoot and eventually land somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And so Easter Island was that spot.
Sean McCready, ladies and gentlemen, full of fun facts.
There's plenty more to come. So yeah, the storms were there. We couldn't land. They couldn't be certain we could, you can't land anywhere else. Not like you can stop at the next airport.
Right.
And so you have to turn around and go back.
So we're turning back. We're now heading back to Santiago, and Sean and I are in crisis planning mode. Okay, so we're getting back to Santiago. Are we going to be able to, is there going to be another flight? Was our first question.
There was a flight that night scheduled.
So Sean knew that, which
but it
was
could
helpful.
be canceled. Our flight was turning around.
It's true. So if we could, we were going to try to get onto that flight. But of course, that flight was going to already have passengers on it. So there was no way that everyone from our flight was going to also be able to get on that flight.
Yep.
So then the two of us are sitting there in our seats okay, here's what you're going to do. Here's what I'm going to do. We're going to go our separate ways. Hopefully one of us will figure out.
Get those last seats on the flight.
Yeah. Pro tip. So we get off the plane. Before we get off the plane, they make an announcement about
everyone go get your bags. We're going to take you to a nearby hotel. You're all going to go at the hotel and we're going to tell you what's going to happen there.
So what Sean knew was that they didn't have another flight to Tahiti
Yeah, there's not supposed to be another flight that week
For
until
another
like
week.
the next week.
So we were like, well, we don't want to go to the hotel. Like we're not gonna get stuck in that situation. So we get to the airport, we make our separate plans, but here's the pro tip, ladies and gentlemen. You should befriend people who speak the local language, because we befriended a woman who was a Spanish teacher in Tahiti. And so she was also trying to get to Tahiti, but spoke the language that, I mean, everyone at the airport also spoke English, but
spoke the native language.
Yeah, spoke the native language. So we get up to the, I don't know, you tell this part of the story.
Yeah, so we grab our bags. We don't take the elevator that everybody else is taking. We run up the stairs. This person, Victoria, who was amazing, was a little nervous because she was flying solo. And so she was glad to have us, and we were glad to have a Spanish-speaking friend. And we ran up the stairs. We get to the front. There's a couple in front of us who talked to the airline agent, and she says, the flight is full. You go to the hotel. We'll tell you what's going to happen. And I look at Victoria, and she's like, it sounds like it's full. And I was like, tell them we're willing to fly standby. Like, we're willing, even if we don't have a seat, we're willing to try in case someone doesn't show up, whatever. And Victoria's like, okay, I'll say that. And so she talks to the gate agent and says, I need to be in Tahiti because I'm flying for work. I'm not flying for my honeymoon. Whereas everybody else in that group, and including that people in front of her, were flying for their honeymoon.
And including us.
And that doesn't make you any special at all. Anywhere else in the world, it makes you a little bit special. There, it makes you just a normal passenger. And so, but she was flying for work. And the gate, the person at the line in the gate said, okay, you can go up and fly standby. And then asked her how, and I don't even know if she asked, but Victoria said, there's 3 of us. And pointed to the 2 of us.
Victoria's amazing.
Victoria's amazing. And the lady says, okay, go on up. We go on up to the gate, and we get there, and they're like, there are 3 seats. They are not together on the flight. And we immediately said, we'll take them. Like, passports out on the table. We'll take them. They ticket us those 3 seats. We're so thrilled, and start walking to the gate. And, 2 out of the 3 of us didn't breathe a sigh of relief. Molly kind of said, whew, we got it.
Yes.
And then we pointed out that the flight takes off in about 20 minutes.
Yeah, I had no idea how much time had passed.
Because we had just flown 2.5 hours and 2.5 hours and waited for bags. And so it was all of a sudden nighttime. And we ran through security, got up to the gate. We had a moment at the gate, peace and calm, got on the flight, got our seats. But you can't relax when you just flew 2.5 hours and then turned around. So we took off, which was one mini celebration. We landed on Easter Island. We didn't get to really leave the airport. We saw the big moai head at the airport. I don't think it's a legitimate one, but
no, I don't think so.
I don't even know if moai. I'm probably saying it wrong. Anyway, we saw one of those. We got some sad pictures taken. We take off again, but still we're nervous because we really want to make sure we land in Tahiti and not Easter Island, because we also have a flight the next day in Tahiti. And we landed in Tahiti. And when we landed in Tahiti, the look of celebration on me, you, and Victoria's face was amazing.
Priceless.
We got our bags, hugged this woman with the joy of 1,000 hugs. And just, she's a living legend in our head. So if you know a Victoria who is a Spanish teacher in Tahiti, tell her about this podcast, because she is the patron saint of our honeymoon. And the fact that her name is Victoria only makes it even better. Like, she was incredible.
She was.
And we made it.
So, that's our fun story about almost not making it to the second half of our honeymoon. We're almost out of air, but we'd love to invite you to follow us on social media. We're at 2 Shallow Divers on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. That's the number 2 Shallow Divers. You can also email us at 2shallowdivers@gmail.com, or you can visit our website, www.2shallowdivers.com. We'll be updating the style and content over the next couple of weeks on our website and adding some pictures from this trip, so feel free to check back for new items.
Thanks for buddying up with Two Shallow Divers today. Until next time, enjoy your dive adventures, and we'll be back soon. But remember, don't hold your breath.